Hi everyone, and welcome to Critically Thinking Christian, where we talk about all kinds of subjects such as Christian culture, pop culture, and more. I'm your host, Alicia. Please note that my videos are primarily intended for a Christian audience. If you're not a Christian, that's fine. I'd love for you to stay and share your thoughts. But by and large, I am assuming that most of the people watching this are in fact Christians. Moreover, I want to make it clear that while I believe my opinions to be reasonable, and I try to base them on both biblical and historical truth, they are ultimately my opinions. If you find them helpful, great. If not, just forget about them. Let's go! Today's video covers an unusually polarizing topic: woke. What does this word mean? Unfortunately, there is no one answer to this question, and the answer will shift depending on who you ask. Let's start with the Merriam-Webster definition. The first definition given is aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of race and social justice. This meaning rose up in the 2010s, referring to people who were awake to social prejudices and injustices. I personally like to refer to this meaning of the word as classic woke. However, this word has changed its meaning over time. Nowadays, it is used largely as a pejorative, meaning politically liberal or progressive, as in matters of racial and social justice, especially in a way that is considered unreasonable or extreme. It's also often applied to people who appear to be practicing performative activism. That is, people who claim to care about social justice, but are really just looking for social, political, or financial clout. I refer to this version of the word as neo-woke. By the way, this changing of meanings over time is extremely common. For instance, the word gay used to mean cheerful or bright, but over time gained a connotation for sexual hedonism and began being used as a synonym for homosexual in the mid-20th century, particularly in the 1960s. That's why we had to change the line in Deck the Halls from "now we don our gay apparel" to "now we don our bright apparel." So it's no use complaining that people today are misusing woke, when by that argument, everyone has been misusing gay for about 60 years now. Of course, the question arises, why did it change? Why did woke used to mean something positive and now is viewed largely as negative? Well, it's largely because the desire for equality has two sources, one very good and the other extremely bad. The good source is the desire for fair play, equal opportunity for all, as is often called. But the bad reason is the hatred of superiority. In all people, there is a temptation to resent what is stronger or better than themselves in any way. Left unchecked, this resentment can lead to a suspicion of mere difference as a claim to superiority. To such a neo-woke person's mind, if someone else thinks differently, it is viewed as an act of defiance. Tolerance is non-existent to such people. And because this envy is being hailed as democratic and labeled as equity, it becomes nigh on impossible to criticize it without being bombarded with insults. As for how the change in wokeism has manifested itself, there are several ways, but I'm going to zero in on two: perceived unfair hiring and management practices, basically DEI, and lack of quality in woke media. The former is a very messy subject that is too broad in scope for me to really cover in detail. Basically, what it amounts to is what is often called affirmative action, where a company or organization hires or accepts people based on demographics in addition to skills and knowledge to satisfy a quota. The original idea behind this was to help marginalized groups, such as blacks or women, get hired and protect them from bigoted managers who would otherwise ignore them. However, in practice, this has often led to the same problem in reverse. Qualified whites or men get overlooked because of demographic characteristics that have nothing to do with the job in question. Essentially, the oppressed become the oppressor. And a lot of this comes down to what I mentioned earlier about performative activism. A lot of companies adopted these practices not because they actually cared about the people they were professing to help, but to improve their reputation and receive financial benefits. These people were never woke in the classic sense, as I defined it earlier. They were just looking for what they could get out of it, and thus relied on quotas to measure their moral character. But these shoddy methods of increasing diversity are the social equivalent to putting a band-aid on a bullet hole, particularly where race is concerned. If you really want to increase racial diversity, then what you do is find poor neighborhoods, many of which are predominantly non-white, give them better housing, and increase their funding for schools so they can get a better education and ultimately secure better jobs. But not only do so many neo-woke activists not actually care about these people, they consider this method to be too slow. They want to see results now. But unfortunately, most quick fixes for such monumental problems in society are ultimately as fruitless as they are attractive. The other problem is the lack of quality in woke media. Media, whether news, movies, games, comics, etc., that is woke in the classic sense doesn't need to say that it is. Its quality content speaks for itself, and it is able to convey its themes in nuanced ways that can be appreciated by anyone willing to listen. But neo-woke media professes very loudly to be woke, because its primary purpose was never actual social justice. It's simply trying to call attention to itself. Thus we have the message. What is the message? Well, in theory, it's that all people are equal no matter what. However, for the neo-woke, social justice is nothing more than a MacGuffin. So in reality, the message basically means that any person who is white, male, straight, conservative, or any combination thereof is automatically inferior to anyone who does not fit these categories. Not only is this a terrible message, but even if they were really woke in the classic sense, none of these creators know how to convey any theme well because they value message over storytelling, or in the case of news, truth-telling. That's because creators view all of these mediums as tools to teach the masses whatever morals they believe them to need. But the moment you ask, what moral do modern audiences need, you are assuming too superior an attitude, and no one wants to be talked down to, especially by rich strangers in Hollywood. Also, because of the neo-woke hatred for superiority, these creators despise the success stories of the past and try to destroy them, rather than humbling themselves and learning lessons from them. All of this so far has been an explanation of what woke means. Now the question arises, what are we as Christians supposed to do about it? First, realize that Christians ought to be classically woke, but not neo-woke. The latter, as I have explained throughout this video, is born out of envy, spite, and self-conceit, and is the polar opposite of Jesus' command in Mark 12:31 to love your neighbor as yourself. We are to learn to do what is good, pursue justice, correct the oppressor, defend the rights of the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. However, when we correct injustices, they have to be real injustices, and that leads me to one of the worst issues of wokeism. People who are neo-woke will often complain about minor problems or even innocuous matters as if they were crimes against humanity. Such people claim that they are being sensitive, but many of these affronts that they are being sensitive to exist only in their heads, and the viciousness with which they protest betrays their true nature. To paraphrase C.S. Lewis, they bleed at a touch and scratch like a wildcat. At the worst, some people will even make up phony charges against others to gain money and attention. The upshot of it all is that people in general have now become so tired of fallacious claims of injustice that they are starting to treat all such claims as suspect, even the ones that are actually true. As some have pointed out, the pendulum is beginning to sway away from wokeism, but my fear is that it will swing back too far, and that real cries of injustice will be left unheard, and that the masses will turn a deaf ear to real victims because they refuse to be fooled again by lies. Just as neo-wokeism was the inappropriate reaction to real oppression in the past, so ignoring social justice would be committing the same sin in the opposite direction. For instance, because so many neo-woke women have said or done stupid or awful things, more and more I see statements of actual sexism against women become accepted because it contradicts wokeism, the resident evil of the day. Again, I will quote Lewis here, "The devil always sends errors into the world in pairs of opposites, and he always encourages us to spend a lot of time thinking which is the worse. You see why, of course. He relies on your extra dislike of one error to draw you gradually into the opposite one. But do not let us be fooled. We have to keep our eyes on the goal and go straight through between both errors. We have no other concern than that with either of them. Neither misogyny nor misandry is acceptable behavior for anyone, let alone a Christian. As for how to handle encounters with neo-woke individuals, it's definitely a tricky business. Jesus himself said it best, "Look, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as serpents and as innocent as doves." Paul writes in 2 Timothy 4:2 that we should correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and teaching. And of course, Jesus commands us to turn the other cheek. That doesn't mean we should be pushovers, quite the contrary. Goodness knows that Jesus and Paul weren't. It means that our responses have to be made with patience and love, because no matter how volatile the person is that we're dealing with, no matter how strongly we disagree with them, Christ died for them too. I won't say that it's easy. God knows I need to be better at it myself. I'm nowhere near as patient and loving to people as I should be. But Jesus himself says, "With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible." Well, that's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. And remember, my brothers and sisters, so whatever you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do everything for the glory of God. Thanks for watching. God bless.